Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Karena Gore, the director of the Center for Earth Ethics. Please come in and take a seat. I'm really happy to have you all here. And we're going to get started in just a minute. We're waiting still for one of our speakers, but we have such an exciting full program that we don't want to delay too much. So please take a seat. There's a lot of there's seats up front here. So come on up if you're in the back. And after this program, we get to hear more of that beautiful jazz. So looking forward to that as well. And thank you to the band, and thank you to Jeannie Cooper-Newton, who has done all of this wonderful work to organize the reception, and to all of the staff of Center for Earth Ethics. I will mention in a moment, in fact, maybe I'll go ahead and mention that now so that I can acknowledge that many people have put in a lot of hard work on this, the staff of Union Theological Seminary, but also Center for Earth Ethics, Tim Cross, Ned Joyner, Tori Field, Alyssa Eng, Samira Sadiq, Shannon Smith, Taylor Enlow, Emily Unterwerger, and also, in addition to Jeannie, I want to single out Allegra Lovejoy, who just started and has organized the program as a project manager. So thank you, Allegra. And now I would like to invite up our president, the president of Union Theological Seminary, Serene Jones. Reverend Dr. Serene Jones.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know how many of you were here 10 years ago for the conference of Religions for the Earth. I really would love to see how many hands go up. I'm having all these flashbacks to this amazing, transformative moment where this chapel was filled with sound and light and poetry and serious conversations and art and every kind of voice and octave and melody that you could imagine, singing in different tones but together about the importance of faith communities to the work of climate justice. And that was 10 years ago, and here we are now is something that I am very joyful about and feel blessed to be here. And I feel particularly blessed to be the president of Union Theological Seminary, because that means I get to work with the amazing Karena Gore, who is the executive director. Woo! Executive director of the Center for Earth Ethics, which many of you know. Karena raised up from the ground, literally grew from a small seed into a world-transforming a force of nature. I think we can use that term to apply to the Center for Earth Ethics. Working with her humility, her brilliance, her sense of presence in the community, and wisdom that goes deep, deep, deep into the earth and draws from it and brings that into our community at Union every day. So I'm honored to be here to welcome all of you to this evening's gathering. May we enjoy the conversation, the music, the food, and most importantly, the fellowship and the community that we build, because we all know that the change we seek depends upon the strength of the relationships that we build and the love and commitment that flows between us and the determination that comes out of that creates the world that we seek to build. Before I step down, I want to share with you a land acknowledgement that is read at Union at the beginning of every event we have. And it's been also a very important part of our identity and was written in conversation deeply with the Center for Earth Ethics. And so here is our land acknowledgement for the land that you are sitting on at this moment. Union Theological Seminary acknowledges and honors the land on which this building stands, as the homeland and territory of the Lenape people, as well as the habitat and dwelling place of the many beings they have been in relationship with. We give thanks to all the spirits of nature, and we pay respect to the Lenape peoples, past, present, and future. And we express support for the flourishing of indigenous peoples and lifeways within this place and everywhere. So I turn it now over to the amazing, wonderful Corinna Gore.
Thank you so much, President Serene Jones. I want everyone here to know that that President Jones is often very, very humble in how she refers to herself, and that one of the things I've found out over the last 10 years of being here is she's really a brilliant theologian. She's written many works and can really speak on so many subjects in a range of theological matters. And she's also, in addition to being the first woman president of this institution, somebody who opens those pathways and forges those paths for others in that way. And in leading this institution, she has made all of the difference in creating the space and the conditions for the Center for Earth Ethics to grow. And I'm so grateful for her support and leadership in that way. So let's give President Serene Jones a big hand. So 10 years ago, we were all here in this room, not all of us who are physically present, but some of us, and many of the traditions and the communities that were in the conference 10 years ago, Religions for the Earth, we are so grateful to have learned from over this past decade and stayed in relationship with. We held this conference here and at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. I want to thank and acknowledge, if he's here yet, yes, there he is, Reverend Fred Davey, who was my boss when I was on the staff of Center for Earth Ethics, when I was on the director of Union Forum, the staff of Union Theological Seminary, working on that conference. And he's remained such an important mentor and leader. I want to thank the partner organizations for Religions for the Earth, Green Faith, Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, Jewish Theological Seminary, Council for Parliament of the World's Religions, the World Council of Churches, the Interfaith Center for New York, the American Indian Institute, National Religious Partnership for the Environment, and Religions for Peace. And I want to think of just a few individuals who worked very hard on it. My colleague, Andrew Schwartz, who was a colleague at Union and then a colleague at Center for Earth Ethics and will forever be in his back with us here tonight. Fletcher Harper, Mary Evelyn Tucker, and Kusamita Peterson. So thank you so much. And we also remember that the People's Climate March was around that same time. It was really the next day, and want to acknowledge that there are people here who organized that. And I believe I see Janet Walton here, and I don't know if Troy Messenger is here, but they actually worked on this incredible service at St. John the Divine that was really spectacular and meaningful. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that as well. And all of folks from Union. Okay, so this gathering 10 years ago changed my life. I'm not going to go on and on about it, but Center for Earth Ethics did grow out of it, and so I want to give thanks to all those that were a part of it, and who have been there laying the foundation for the Center for Earth Ethics. And I'll just mention especially all the staff. I mentioned them already, but we have had extraordinary volunteer leadership over the years. And to acknowledge the advisory board co-chairs emeritus, Ken Kitatani, Thea Reggio, Gregory Simpson, and Betty Lyons, at least a few of whom are here, so thank you. And our current co-chairs, Fred Davey, Kusamita Peterson, and Tiogasin Ghost Horse. So I also finally just want to acknowledge respectfully and gratefully the presence of someone else who's been a very big supporter of the Center for Earth Ethics from the beginning and has contributed in immeasurable ways, and that is my father, former vice president and chairman of the Climate Reality Project, Al Gore. So thank you. So, in keeping with the spirit of the conference, we're not simply here to lift up that gathering or any of the specific organizations involved. We're here to focus our attention on this moment and this movement, to face this unprecedented existential challenge of the climate crisis, which, despite the importance of things like data and technology and science, is at its core about values. By drawing from the world's sacred ancestral faith and wisdom traditions. And we can't possibly have all of the voices that represent that well and comprehensively represented on the stage, but we are so grateful that we have these truly extraordinary ones. And I want to please ask you to look at their full biographies on the QR code program that you have so that I can just introduce them very briefly, but hopefully you will look into their backgrounds, their organizations, and follow and support their work. We have Reverend Fletcher Harper of Green Faith, Dr. Rajwant Singh of EcoSeek, Rabbi Jenny Rosen of Dayenu, Reverend Leo Woodbury of New Alpha CDC and Kingdom Living Temple, and Tom Goldtooth, who will join us in a moment, he's on his way, of Indigenous Environmental Network. So we're also honored to be joined by grandmother Mona Palaka, an elder of Havasupai, Tewa, and Hopi lineages, who was once a senior fellow at the Center for Earth Ethics, and now works as Indigenous Water Ethics Coordinator at the Indigenous Environmental Network. So she and I are going to sit on either end as co-moderators of this program, and to begin, we invite her now to offer some words.
Communion. I'd just like to greet each and every one of you. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening, the Center for Earth Ethics, taking time out here to acknowledge our concerns, acknowledge all of the basic elements of life, and also want to also acknowledge the work of all of the people over time immemorial who have been acknowledging and recognizing that this Mother Earth that makes our home here is very, very sacred and is a life form that gives us life. So I just wanted to go ahead and say that, and also thank, I call her my niece, Corinna Gore. I call her my niece. I have that kind of relationship with her, and I'm very honored and humbled that she invited me to come and join you all here tonight and be here during this Climate Week. And also acknowledge her good father, former President Gore, Vice President Gore, for all of the work that you've been doing and all of the efforts that you have made and introducing this concept of recognizing that climate is important to take care of. So I want to thank you that way, and I just also would like to thank the ancestors of the land, the Lenape nation, and also give thanks to for the water, the air, the fire, the earth, all of these sacred divine creations that give us our life. And along that line, I'm going to go ahead and sing a prayer song that acknowledges everything of life, including the center of Mother Earth, her heart, and all the way through her body, and all the way to the surface, and all the way within us through our our connections with Mother Earth as we walk in this life. So I'm going to go ahead and sing this song. We santo te, 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 we santo te. Bakauni va, bakauni bum, bakauni va, bakauni bum, bakauni va, bakauni bum, bakauni va, bakauni bum. We santo te, we santo te. We santo te, 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 we santo te. Bakauni va, bakauni bum, bakauni va, bakauni bum, bakauni va, bakauni bum, bakauni va, bakauni bum. Oh, esculi, 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 esculi. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is this working? Yes. I need to ask forgiveness right away from our extraordinary speakers and also from the audience that I have asked for 5-minute answers to a rather big couple of questions. And so I hope that if you see me go like this, it's only to know that 5 minutes has passed. And also Tori Field is hopefully going to hold up a number. And I see we have Tom Goldtooth here, and we'll welcome him to join us up here. So the first question. Hi, Tom. The first question is, looking back at the last 10 years, since September 2014, at this intersection of climate and faith, spirituality, or sacred values, what have been the things that stand out to you? What have been the breakthroughs, the highlights, and also the challenges, or perhaps the missed opportunities? And I will start, we'll start down there with you, Fletcher, and go down the line.
Great. Thanks, Corinna, and thanks to President Jones and the UTS team. I'm a proud alum, so it's great to be back. To jump right in, there have been a number of successes. Before we talk about them, there was a time before 10 years ago when pioneers like Mary Evelyn Tucker and Kusamita Peterson and Kathleen Degnan and others were first starting to raise this issue as a vital focus for faith communities. In no particular order, the fossil fuel divestment movement and the faith community's role in that has been an incredibly important piece of the picture, both because of the faith community contributing more divestment commitments by number than any other sector of society, but also because of the sometimes pretty fierce arguments that challenge and that necessary challenge to faith communities put forward. There were more than one religious institution that fought it much harder than they should have, and that continue to fight it to this day, but that's been an important success. I'm really glad Tom arrived, because I think that one area of success has been that faith communities have increasingly gotten involved in different fossil fuel fights. Often those fights have been led by indigenous communities. So whether it's been Standing Rock or Line 3, here in the United States, but you also see this now happening internationally across Uganda and Tanzania. Faith communities are a central part of the fight against the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Issued a groundbreaking report last year that showed how Total Energies is systematically desecrating traditional grave sites along the proposed pipeline route. And also in Indonesia recently, some really courageous pushback by faith communities, by young Muslims, when the country's two largest Islamic organizations, NU and Muhammadiyah, entered into a sweetheart deal with the new right-wing government there to accept and invest in concessions for coal mining. So the fossil fuel fights have been an important positive step. Mobilizations, faith groups played leading roles in the People's Climate March #2, when we surrounded the Trump White House while he was in there, along with other things, and then made gestures that we won't mention in chapel about that, but it was good nonetheless. Up to just last year, the March to End Fossil Fuels, which made Climate Week a heck of a lot more meaningful because it strategically captured the media attention of the world with front page pictures of young people protesting fossil fuel expansion. So there have been some meaningful successes, but there are also a lot of things that remain to be done. The first thing is that certainly in this country, but around the world, you see this conflation of fundamentalist expressions of religion. In this country, it's white nationalist evangelicals. You see it in India with the Modi regime and its hateful Hindutva, Hindu nationalist ideology. You see different forms of hardcore Islamism in certain Gulf and Muslim majority countries, where there's a combination of an anti-climate, anti-women, anti-LGBTQ, anti-poor, anti-religious minority ideology that is extraordinarily destructive. And we have not, as progressive religious leaders, done nearly a good enough job of speaking up against that and seeking to delegitimize it, as it is in the course of delegitimizing religion for hundreds and hundreds of millions of people around the world. We haven't done enough work yet on building a strong case for the importance of green jobs and how the fight against climate needs to be a fight to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. We haven't done nearly enough following the lead of indigenous communities. Everywhere there are frontline fights going on. And I can stop there, but lots of good stuff, but a lot to be done still.
Is this on? Yeah. Thanks, Fletcher. So I want to start by saying we are living in such dark times. And I think one of the changes in the last 10 years is how much harm and damage has been done in the last 10 years, and how many more people are feeling the impacts of the climate crisis. I think there are communities that have been bearing the brunt of it for years and years, and the last statistic I saw from the Union of Concerned Scientists was that since May 1st, 100% of Americans have gotten an extreme weather alert. What has also happened during this time is that many, many more communities of faith are galvanizing. I lead an organization that's only 4 years old, Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action. And I think that that is a reflection of, it's on the shoulders of other Jewish organizations, but the activism that we're seeing across faith communities, I think, is at a new level. There are lots of important developments. I'm so glad that you gave a listing, Fletcher, because I really just want to speak about one development in the last 10 years, which is that the climate crisis is not only a political, social justice, ecological issue, it's also an issue of the soul. And I think that there is a growing recognition of that among faith communities, and a growing recognition of the need to spiritually resource people in the face of the climate crisis. There are, of course, pioneers. I'm thinking of Joanna Macy, the grandmother, one of the grandmothers of this work through her work that reconnects. But we are seeing many more communities build upon that work. And I think that we're also seeing it, some of that actually comes from the broader social justice movement. I think one of the things that came, maybe the only good thing that came out of the Trump presidency, was that in the resistance that built up, there was so much damage and so much despair that social justice movements began to recognize the need to spiritually resource people in that work. So if you think about the secular climate movement and the power of song in the Sunrise Movement or workshops that Extinction Rebellion started to develop, so all the more so in faith communities, and a growing understanding of the need for us to be giving people spaces to confront those really hard climate emotions. For some, that's grief, loss, anger, guilt. I think it's different, and I think it's different across the generations. I think different generations are metabolizing or confronting this in different ways. It's a conversation for another time. But I think that we are seeing things that we never heard of before. Climate chaplaincy, whole area of work now that is emerging. When I started Dainu and I said we're building a spiritually rooted Jewish climate movement, we're going to be mobilizing for systemic political change, and we're going to be developing what we're calling spiritual adaptation. Talk about climate mitigation and adaptation, spiritual adaptation. People were like, I get the political stuff. What's this like hoo-hoo thing that you're doing? People don't ask that anymore because climate grief and climate anxiety is so much in the zeitgeist, and there is such power in the way that faith communities are picking this up, knowing that this is what it means to engage people meaningfully in this time in history. So we know that we need this work, and we've developed this work to spiritually resource people in the face of the climate movement, people who are engaged in this, all of you, in this really hard and holy work, in it for the long haul. The question I have is whether this is also a way to bring people into the work. I think one of the challenges we all face, you asked about challenges, is how to engage more people in the work. We know that most Americans are concerned about the climate crisis, but most are not engaged. Or if they're engaged, it's not commensurate with the scale of what's happening. And I think people don't know what to do. I also think that there is an emotional overwhelm. I think there's a sense of like disassociation. It's too much to imagine what our future will hold for ourselves and our children. So people sort of disassociate, get busy with their lives. And I wonder whether some of this spiritual resourcing could actually be a pathway in. If people can, I have this image of like everyone throws themselves against the closet door, like I don't want to go there. We all have friends and family members who, yeah, I know, but could we use some of this spiritual resourcing to give people space to grapple with the really hard climate emotions, not to stop there, to cultivate active hope, and to move into courageous action rooted in our faith and our spirit and our traditions and our teachings, and rooted in community. So you asked about challenges and missed opportunities. There's a lot more work to be done, and I'm looking forward to the second part of this conversation to share some of that.
Well, I have to just say I am overjoyed to be in this place and in this time, because I'm one of the people who started off decades ago, like our former vice president, and the faith community was not involved. So many of us joined the environmental justice movement, the climate movement 30 years ago, because there was not space for us in our churches, in our masjids, in our temples. And I remember 10 years ago when they had the People's Climate March, and I went there and I met Fletcher, and Fletcher, you remember they had this giant Noah's Ark that was showing people what we might have to deal with in the future. And every day there's flooding all over this country. But I didn't march that day. And the reason why I didn't march was because I had to get here to Union Theological Seminary, where there was a declaration of faith. And we saw all of these people, Sikhs, Muslims, Jews, Christians, just from every possible faith that you could think of off of the top of your head. And then not long after, I met Corinna Gore there. And not long after that, she shared her vision about the Center for Earth Ethics. So that's one of the main challenges that we've had to deal with in the past and still have to deal with today. That the majority of the people on this planet consider themselves people of faith. And we know that we're called, regardless of what religion we practice, that we are called to be stewards of the earth. And when I think of my faith tradition, that we're called to subdue the work and have the to subdue the earth and have dominion over it, and everything that flies in the air, crawls on the earth, swims under the water, to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. I have to think about, from my faith tradition and others, that that's before the fall. So we're supposed to be dealing with this planet, with our earth, in a benevolent and a loving way. And that's been a huge challenge, because too many of our places of faith and people of faith are still not engaged. And I wish oftentimes that we could look back and see what the faith community has created. That we've created farms, we've had agricultural colleges. You know, we look at Spelman College and Fisk University and other places starting in the basement of churches and other edifices of faith. There is so much that we can do if we come together. But one of the great challenges we had 10 years ago that I think we have kind of overcome were the climate deniers and the climate delayers. But it's awfully hard today for people to say that climate change is not real. Because everywhere on the earth, every day in this country, there's a hurricane, there's torrential rains, there's straight line winds, there's tornadoes, there's extreme heat, there's wildfires. It's true, it's here. We recognize it, and we are facing an existential problem that the world and history has never seen before. We're talking about the very life of creatures and human beings continuing to exist. I have to quote someone who is not a person of faith, Bill Maher, who one time said that if the earth considered that we're the problem, that we're the virus, oh, don't feel so superior. Because he said the planet will shake us off like a big dog shakes off fleas. So one of the challenges that we have to face right now is that we're not where we ought to be. We're not doing everything that we can do. I believe that the solution not only lies in the hands of government or corporations or big greens or institutions, but it lies in the hands and the hearts and the minds of each and every one of us. That community-led solutions, everyday practices, caring about our neighbors, doing the things that will make our earth more resilient and more sustainable until we pass this crisis is something that we all must do. That we can't just leave it up to the politicians or anyone else. We are all called to be stewards of the earth. So the big challenge that we have now is greenwashing. They're trying to convince us now that carbon capture and what I call all this Frankenstein technology that is untested, that if we sit back and we say perhaps that's the answer, no, it is not. We have to learn to live with the earth. We have to have an ethical approach to life that that works with the earth. To realize that we are not separate from nature, but that we are a part of nature. And I'll just say this, that no matter how big the challenge may be, if you're a person of faith, then we know we've been through horrible things. We know we have been subjected to the fall of empires. We know that we have faced plagues and recently a pandemic. We know that we have endured slavery and colonialism and discrimination against women and everyone. But you want to know something? We're still here. And we can be here if we let our faith lead the way. No matter what anyone says, no matter what we see, my faith tradition says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And one time we couldn't see all of us gathered here, but one day, if not us, then others will be gathered in a place where the challenges are different, but the wins will be beyond our imagination. Thank you.
Hello. It's good to see my sister Mona here, one of our 13 grannies. Those indigenous grandmothers came together a number of years ago to provide a voice of our women, our elders, to talk about faith, to talk about hope. To talk about truth. So it's good that you're here, and I know you've been working a lot with Karina and this other man down here, Mr. Fletcher. We've been in the streets together. Yeah, my name is Tom Goldtooth. I'm Dene in Dakota. Yate the Bethlehemina Ashle, Wo Dakota Bashishichi. How Medakia P. You're all my relatives, all of you. Chante Washtea na Pechi Yosapado. From my heart, I shake all of your hands. It's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I was looking at these pillars on how strong they could be to support and lift up the faith of people that come in here. Are they that strong? There's a lot of pillars in a lot of the chapels that I've been in. Big pillars. And it always creates a point for me to think about how strong are these pillars. I think one of the challenges that I have, as I've been advised by my spiritual authorities to go out and speak to humanity. And now, that was years ago. Now I'm an elder, I'm 71. And starting to feel it in my bones. But one thing that is a challenge, I don't have enough time to sing my songs. A lot of my indigenous brothers and sisters from throughout Uchimaka, the Mother Earth, often say the same thing. We don't have enough time to sing our songs. I was sitting with the Khoisan people in South Africa one time. They have beautiful language. They click. They have song, and the women have song. So I'm going to sing a song to satisfy these years that I've been challenged of not having enough time to sing my song. You can remain seated. Wakanta ya 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 hota ya kia a uedo hey hey. Wakanta ya ya hota ya kia a uedo hey hey. Wambadi hadishka oyate hey wan. Wakantaya kia a uedo hey hey. Wakaya ya kia a uedo hey yo yo. Ik chewi chasha chandu pake. Hey ya kia pia a uedo hey yo. Wambadi hadishka oyate hey wan. Wakantaya kia a uedo hey hey. Wakaya ya kia a uedo hey hoy. Way ya hey 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 ya way ya hey ya hey hey way ya hey hey ya way ya hey ya hey ya hey hey way ya hey ya hey ya way ya hey way ya hey way yo hey way yo hey ya hey ya hey yo now Mini Wachoni it's the water of life. You probably heard that on the television during the Dakota the Dakota pipeline campaign. Mini Wachoni, the water of life. Someone mentioned Standing Rock. I have relatives at Standing Rock. It's the homeland of one of our holy men, our chiefs, Sitting Bull. We have a Sundance there. We have prayer there. Our men and our women dance 4 days without food and water. It is our sacrifice that we make in celebration of life, in celebration of our relationship with Unchimaka, Mother Earth, in celebration of our relationship with the Father Sky, in celebration with each other through our struggles, our hurts and pains, lost loved ones, the beauty of birth, the Mini Wachoni, when our mothers and our babies are swimming in their mother's womb. The signal or the sign of life that's coming this way is when that mother passes water, the water of life that is coming this way. How is it that this knowledge is not acknowledged by the colonial governments? I'm saying governments because they're all over the world. Why is it this knowledge I just shared with you is not respected by a lot of our churches? Why is it that who we are was such a threat and is still a threat. What is it that's a threat? As I talk and shared this song, a little quick teaching of the water of life. That term went global in this campaign of the common people, the Ikchewichashta of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota peoples, and the youth, the women, the elders coming together to stand against the encroachment of our sacred lands and the river on this violent act of aggression to put a pipeline into the ground, to ram that pipeline under the Missouri River, not asking permission, not having a ceremony. Where are the faith keepers of their culture to guide them and say, no, you should not do that? You should at least ask permission from the water, the spirits. Ask permission from the earth before you dig into and make a trench to put in the pipeline. How do you know you did not degrade sacred sites? How do you know you're not disturbing the home, the safe home of the animals and the birds? Those are things that were of concern. This word that's related to Mini Wachoni. Wachoni is life. But our relationship to the grandfather, the creator, the maker of the universe, the Mother Earth, Wakantanka, the Great Spirit. Wakantanka Wachoni Maku. Great Spirit gives me life. Wachoni Maku, me, Wakantanka. Those three words. No one asked us if we had an understanding of Genesis. No one asked us if we had understanding of the sacred. We were coined as pagans, didn't even have a soul. And that mentality is still happening throughout this world. Still happening. Unchimaka is my grandmother Earth. Unchimaka Wichoni Maku. My grandmother Earth gives me life. The water, Mini Wachoni Maku, gives me life. So how do we carve in an understanding of the strength in our relationship with the sacredness of Unchimaka, Mother Earth, and rely on that to give us hope, confidence in who we are, and identification, a Madakie relationship? How do we convey that when we've been under attack for so long? Or even the tribes of Europe, or even the Sami. What campaigns destroyed the old tribal knowledge in Europe to redefine the relationship, importance, and sacredness of the woman? In Europe, they passed the water of life. What happened as there's been hundreds and hundreds of years of re-identification of the role and history of the woman of Europe? And how do we change that in my final 0 minutes? How do we change that for change? I've used the word climate change, systemic change. How do we change the mentality? It's deeper than the philosophy of how people maintain a relationship to what? I've always remind people need to re-identify, re-evaluate their relationship to the sacredness of the female principle of creation. Erase and pull back the concepts of dominion. Dominion over our woman, dominion over Mother Earth, it's the same thing. Dominion. We got a lot of work to do. Unchimaka is reminding us of our role and responsibilities and duties to understand the territorial integrity of the sacredness of Mother Earth. And as we're campaigning for the recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples, our governments like United States and Canada, they say as long as it doesn't affect the political integrity of the nation state. Why are we such a threat that they want to deny who we are and our rights to exist, inherent rights, collective rights as peoples, collective right, not individual human rights, to exist as peoples. We fought so long for that. The same way that we are fighting that Mother Earth and the sacredness of Mother Earth be respected, and that we be reminded of what our spiritual duties are, our religious duties are, and responsibilities to recognize the territorial integrity of Unchimaka, her rights. Her rights. We have laws of property rights, of dominion concepts, property rights over the earth. So that's the challenges carved in a nutshell. You know, it's good to see my friend over here. I seen you in Copenhagen. You were sitting in the chairs, in the benches with your cowboy boots, and I sat next to you in Copenhagen at a climate meeting. There were brown cowboy boots. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is really an amazing gathering. I'm seeing Vice President Gore. You inspired me in 1990 in Moscow at the Global Forum, where as a senator you presented your thoughts on how Earth's environment was deteriorating. At that time, we were not talking about climate. So I just want to acknowledge your positive role in this entire movement. And Kusumita was there as well in Moscow in 1990. So it's been 34 years. And 10 years ago, another person who inspired me for gathering all the faith leaders and various activists. So when I left this room, I was full of energy, and we wanted to create an impact and see how we can, as an individuals or as a faith community, can make a difference. Because in our religion, the founder of our faith has said that galni jog na hui, that you cannot feel closeness to God just by your talk. If there is no action, all talk is a fantasy. And he also emphasized Man bach kram har gun nahi gaye. That whatever your thoughts are, and whatever your words are, and your actions, if they are not aligned, you will get an F in life. So every word has to be backed by action. So we can continue to preach all day, all night, and we can point fingers at others. But as a faith community representatives and faithful persons, we have to take action. So we decided that in the next in 2019, we were going to celebrate the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith. And Guru Nanak preached about nature as an inspiration for anyone who wants to find God. God lives in nature, and if you want to really feel closeness to God, then you have to have nature in reverence. So we've decided that we were going to plant 1 million trees. So Karina, in the last 10 years, in 2019, which was 5 years after the gathering here, we decided that we were going to plant 1 million trees. And we faced a lot of challenges because people thought these trees will not make any difference. Your actions are not going to be, this is too big a goal for you to achieve. Where are you going to get the funds from? Who's going to join you? The government is not going to support you. But I want to tell you, I want to give you a very positive report that in the last 5 years, we have planted 550,000 trees. And these are small forests in urban settings, in the rural areas. In a small stage area like this, you can plant 550 trees of native species, and they survive 100%. And what I want to tell you is in these operations, we have had 35,000 people planted trees with their own hands, and out of which 17,000 were women who participated in this. And now you might wonder, where did the money come from? We did not get any money from any corporations. We got zero help from the government, and this was all people donating money and offering their own land. So just imagine if a faith leader takes a step, people will follow. And this has been a great journey. We are also noticing that there is a biodiversity coming back. There are species of birds which people have never seen in their villages, in their own urban settings. These birds are coming there and giving you that a feeling of regeneration. So we can sit and wait for corporations to take action. We can sit for governmental leaders to take action or the politicians to take action, or we can decide to take action ourselves. And in this whole operation, I was just calculating how much money did it require for us to take this action for 550 trees. It cost only $1.5 million. And 90% of this money has come from common people donating their life savings and offering their own precious land and forever designating that as a sacred forest. So I'll end my talk with this beautiful message from our cohabitants of the earth. These are the birds who are living in these forests, and this was in a most polluted area, chemical dump area, where we planted this forest. So just wanted to tell you that if we all decide to do something, it can happen. Mother Nature is waiting for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much to each of you. Powerful words and beautiful sounds and experiences. I'm feeling quite moved and grateful, and also want to see if anyone needs a glass of water or anything. You're all good? Okay. We have one more question. And this time, I think we'll start with you, Reverend Woodbury, and go that way as if we're in a circle, and then come from Fletcher back to Rajwant. And the question is, we've talked a little bit about the last 10 years and what some of the breakthroughs and the challenges have been in this intersection of faith and climate. Or you could say, instead of faith, you could say spirituality, sacred values. We all know that there are many words to use in that place. Now, the question is, what are the strategic priorities and the vision for the future? And so, Reverend Leo Woodbury, I'd like to start with you.
Well, wow, that's a lot. What is the vision? And I believe that there's so many things that we can say. One of the visions is that we have to get away from this conspicuous consumption, this addiction that we have, that we need to have more and more and more. And what comes to mind is a quote from Gandhi, who said that the earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not enough for everyone's greed. And that's the problem that we're facing right now. There's enough to sustain us all. And I think if we can get away from politics, if we can get away from economics, if we can get away from what we sometimes say in the black church, if we can get away from sometimes being so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good, that we can have a different vision. And that vision should be that we are spiritual beings, that there's a spirit that enlivens all of us. And if we can realize that we are part of what my brother Tom calls the Great Spirit, that we're all interconnected, that we can have a better, different world. But we have to establish a different vision. We have to realize that each and every one of us, as well as the earth, is sacred. That every single thing is precious. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the wind that blows and allows the earth to be seeded so that we have clothes to wear and food to eat. To realize that everything is not only sacred, but on top of that, that if we don't realize that, then something is going to die. And that death is going to be not just physical, but it's a spiritual death. And we know that by what we see going on in the world. It's as the rabbi said, we're in a very dark place. And if we cannot envision a world where everyone has food to eat, everyone has clean water to drink, everyone has clean air to breathe, and to realize that, you know what, it's not us. It's this earth. It's Mother Earth that gives life to every pebble, every grain of sand, every living thing, flora, fauna, that none of us will exist unless we realize there's a spirit, there's a love, there's a vision that says, without one another, one day there'll be none of us. And so that's the vision that I have. It's from my faith tradition, where no more sickness, no more hunger, no more war, swords beaten into plowshares, the lion lays down with the lamb. And if we can envision that, then we can have a world where we don't have suffering, where we don't have people who don't care about anybody or anything but our small circle. I'm going to close saying this one thing. I was in the air flying once, and I had been in a very crowded airport, and I thought about the billions of people on this planet. And I thought to myself, you know, Leo Woodbury, you're nothing. You're an ant on a small anthill in this entire universe. So let's stop thinking so much about ourselves, about our nation, what we wear, what we have, and realize that the only thing we have is a spirit that enlivens this earth, enlivens each and every one of us. Stop thinking so big. Let's realize that we are small. And the thing that makes us great is the totality of our accomplishments and not our individual selves. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to take us from the beautiful words of the spirit and the smallness to the other end of the spectrum, to say that I believe we're in a moment where we need bold, not incremental action. And we need a response collectively, to your point, that is commensurate with the scale that we need and the speed that we need, and that science and justice demand. So I think this is a moment that really calls for transformation, and I'm thinking about what is the role for faith communities and faith leaders, because every part of our society has a role to play. All God's creatures got a voice in the choir. So what is the role for faith communities and faith leaders? We are in a moment, a window, where we still have time, scientists tell us, to pull ourselves back from the brink of devastating destruction, even beyond what we've experienced, and we still have time to build a just, green, equitable energy future and economy. But this is going to take a few things. It's going to take moral courage, it's going to take vision, and it's going to take, I think, organizing. And it's going to require us all to lean into that collective that you spoke of, our collective power. We have collective power. We don't always recognize that. So beyond continuing, as I spoke before, to spiritually resource people and communities in the face of the climate crisis, I think there are three other priorities. And I want to just say as a caveat, these are not new. There are people on this stage and in this room and beyond who have been working along, on all three of these priorities for many, many years. So these are not new, but I think they are the priorities that as we enter into these next years, we need to keep front and center as communities of faith and faith leaders. So one is lifting up a clear moral call, centering the values. Every human being has equal worth. Everybody is a reflection of God. Everybody has a right to clean air and water and shelter. We have a mandate to protect, not sacrifice those who are most vulnerable. Choose life, not death. Blessing, not curse. Pursue justice. A moral voice means always asking whose lives should be at the center of our solutions. Because we know that the impacts of the climate crisis have and continue to rest disproportionately on those who've been historically marginalized. What is our moral call? What are we centering? Raising a moral voice also means not being afraid to name evil. This is a funny one. There's a strange reluctance sometimes to name evil. We know that the fossil fuel industry and those who do their bidding are the Goliaths of our time. And we must not hesitate to say so clearly and without caveat. So faith communities, I believe, have to come together with moral courage at the level, at the decibel, and collectively. Second, our religious traditions remind us that a different world is possible. You started to speak about that different world, Reverend. And we need to hold out a vision for that world. We're at a time that requires radical imagination. Because we don't only need to fight the bad, we also need to build the good. We need to honor our earth and each other. What is that world that we're seeking to create? A world in which we care for one another, where all people can live lives of dignity and meaning. This is the stuff of our traditions, and this is one of the, I think, essential contributions for communities of faith and faith leaders to offer in a time when doom and despair so easily can overtake us, when a lack of moral imagination is all too easy. Part of our work is to offer that, to cultivate spaces in which people can imagine a different future. And finally, we need to enter an era of fierce organizing. Of course, there has been organizing, and we need more strategic, and we need more spiritually rooted organizing. Faith communities are communities, they're bases, they're already organized communities. So name any social movement, and faith communities have been part of it, sometimes even at the center of it. So how do we build power for systemic change? Because we need systemic change if we're going to avert the worst and build that better future. Our traditions are also an incredible wellspring, I think, of inspiration and of agency. A sense that people can really move from the angst that so many feel to action, to agency. In my tradition, when we were wandering in the desert, God said to us, the path forward, lo b'shamayim hi. It is not in the heavens or beyond your reach. It is in your heart and in your hand to do it. Lo b'shamayim hi. It is on us. It is on us as in it's our responsibility, but it's also up to us, like we actually have the capacity to do this. So I believe continue to spiritually resource people, lift up a moral voice, hold out a vision of the world as it could be, and organize for systemic change, empowering people to move from angst to action. So this is what I think we are called to do in this really treacherous time in history, and a time that also has enormous possibility.
Thanks, Jenny and Leo and all. I think what I'm going to say is, in many ways, a restating of things that have been said, but in a slightly different way. So what we need in the next 10 years is an immediate end to new fossil fuel project development. We need to be well on the way to an equitable phase out of existing production. We need international commitments to 100% clean energy for absolutely everybody, and a just transition that, as I said earlier, creates jobs that lift hundreds of millions of people to a better life. We need very substantial loss and damage commitments from governments that are the historic polluters and industries as well. And we need universal, strong, enforceable protection of indigenous rights. So I'm going to dig a little bit more into each of these, but I think at the outset I want to say that it is really important for religious leaders to be able to integrate the spiritual wisdom that's been referenced here with specific targets, measurable demands for governments and for financial institutions and others. So start with the fossil fuel phase out. There's an important new instrument, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, that has gained a lot of support internationally and quickly. We've helped organize faith groups around that around the world, and that's going to be scaling up in the coming weeks and months. Faith communities, I will speak honestly, I am really tired of going to religious environmental events where someone mentions that 83% of the world's population is religious. Nowhere close to 2% of the world's people of faith are active on this now. We've got to do better. So we need to see at least 1 million people of faith around the world endorse that fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty call within 6 months. We need to start to flex some muscle, and we need to do it quickly because the times demand it and because we can. We also need more and more people of faith, and I'm smiling looking at my friend Patrick Carolyn here. We need more people to do a Patrick and start putting their bodies on the line and being willing to engage in peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience. And I see Imam Safet Chadovich behind Patrick, and we do well to follow their example on this. It's to Jenny's point about incrementalism being ineffective and wrong at this point. We just have to see stronger leadership from faith leaders around the country and around the world on this. I get invited because of the white male cis thing to speak at a lot of wealthy Episcopal churches because I'm Episcopalian. I am so tired of having the rector of those churches call me up anxiously the week before and say, please don't talk about politics, please don't say the T word, please don't talk about economics. And you know what, you go and you talk about this stuff and you get people standing up and applauding, and you realize that there is an enormous hunger for real, unafraid spiritual leadership, to Tom's point on these issues. And, you know, maybe it's easier being a guest preacher, but come on, again, we've got to be able to do better as faith communities on this. Finance is another area that's key. Just last week, a number of us were on the call with executives at Citibank, who's, you know, since the Paris Agreement, the world's biggest funder of fossil fuels. I mean, they sort of make the metaphor of more money than God real. And, you know, they're fully convinced that they're doing the right thing as they continue to plow trillions of dollars into new fossil fuel projects that violate indigenous rights, that foul the air and the water. And, you know, again, every faith community needs to be interrogating its banker about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and needs to be making it clear that it's unacceptable for banks and financial institutions to be funding new fossil fuel projects at this point. Banks and, you know, a lot of these technocrats and financial leaders have sort of, you know, we call it a delusion in religious worlds. It's a sort of there's a disinformation that's made up of, you know, carbon capture and sequestration and marine cloud brightening and, you know, all these kinds of, you know, climate geoengineering and, you know, carbon credit, you know, extraordinarily low quality carbon credit projects that serve to legitimize the status quo. Faith leaders have to challenge that and have to challenge financial leaders, and we've got to study up and get good at that. Final piece I'll talk about is the loss and damage thing. It's for real that there are, I mean, right now, 5 countries are responsible for more than 80% of the world's fossil fuel expansion. It's the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and Norway. These countries need to pay up. They need to be pressured to pay up. The one thing we know, you know, is that none of them are going to volunteer to do this. And so, you know what, who's going to have to force them? It's not just going to be faith communities alone, but there's got to be strong faith insistence on this. So the fossil fuel industry ought to have to pay up also for their decades of disinformation, and there's a lot of sort of early stage good organizing going on around to make polluters pay kind of bill in this country, and litigation around that as well. So I think we've got to take the spiritual fortitude that others have talked about much better than me here, and make it specific and make it actionable. And religious groups have to step up on this in a big way. They don't just have to step up for the sake of the climate. If we want religious communities to be a meaningful part of the future, we better step up, because otherwise, why would people bother?
Thank you so much. And just to check in for a moment about where we are in the program, we're running a little bit behind, but still exactly the right time to as planned, hear the responses about strategic priorities in the present and vision for the future from Dr. Singh and from Tom Goldtooth, and then we'll go to Mona for a final word.
Thank you. In the next 10 years, we have a plan to reach out to a lot of the farmers to switch to sustainable farming. So we are creating workshops to educate these farmers. And also we are preaching and reaching out to hundreds and thousands of people in the Sikh congregations and across the faiths, also to make the right food choices, which are more sustainable grains, and how do we create our own food choices to make a difference, because it contributes to Earth's degradation. And the third thing is that we want to plant a first forest in Maryland, in a masjid, in a mosque, and the Sikh community will be planting a forest of 550 trees. And hopefully this will become a movement that we want to take it across United States. We are also looking into planting forests in California and in Canada. And our goal is today, I'm declaring, which we will be making a public announcement, official announcement, that in next 10 years, we'll be planting 10 million trees. And thank you. And these 10 million trees will bring back the biodiversity, will restore the local ecology, it will replenish the soil, and it regulates the temperature. If you're outside the forest, the temperature is 52. If you step inside the forest, it is 45. So 7-degree difference, we have seen it, we have tested, we have the videos. So these are all very practical steps that we all can take rather than waiting for someone to rescue us or rescue the planet. Nobody's going to do it. We are the people we have been waiting for. This is what President Obama used to say, right? And look at the political campaign. In the first 3 days of Vice President Harris's campaign, people donated less than $5. And within 3 days, they collected $350 million. That right there shows that people are waiting for some movement. And if we were to translate that into a religious movement to save the planet, rather than waiting for the corporations or politicians, just imagine what will happen to this planet in the next 10 years. We do not have time to wait. We do not have time to preach. The preaching is over. The time is to take action. And the world is waiting for the earth is calling us. And I will end by saying that I can talk and impress you and feel very good, but at the end, when we calculate what has been accomplished, 0. So we have to come up with a plan to back our action, whatever the word we utter. So I will end with one small couplet or one small poem from my faith tradition, and I will sing it. Polea home surat bisa home mar vichar man gun vich gun ਲੈ ਸਾਰ ਭੋਲਿਆ ਹਉਮੈ ਸੁਰਤ ਬਿਸਾਰ. The founder of the faith says that, oh lost person, oh lost human being, why are you wandering around? Why are you surrounding yourself with egoic talks? You're always talking about ego. And whereas you can reflect and how the trees are giving you a lesson. Dharm paid, the true religion is your thinking about others. And when you do that, then God will become the branches. Dharm paid, shakha hari, dharm full phal gyan. Then the true religion will be the fruit, and the true fruit will be that wisdom that will guide you forever. So let us all pledge today that when we walk out of this sanctuary, we take action and not wait for anyone else. We are the people we have been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you. Our priority is to bring hope back to our children, bring hope back to our teenagers, our young people. There's a lot of suicide back home. As we travel, as I travel with different communities, different cultures, the parents and grandparents worry about the youth. And when we talk about creating a political will on addressing climate change, And a lot of our climate activists get frustrated that not enough of people from America or Canada, Europe, especially the northern industrialized countries, don't have a political will. Hope is part of how do we build hope? And it's connected to what I heard about faith. So my family, our community, and many other communities, we work with people that are committed around language restoration. Children still do not know our indigenous language, and that's our connection to the sacred. That's our connection to the environment. Like when I said, Wakantanka wichoni maku. That has a lot of meaning, or mini wichoni, and breaking down wichoni. It has its own complexity and understanding a relationship, midakie, a relationship with the sacred. So it's a commitment for language restoration. That's one of the wars that we are confronting in our native communities. Maintain our language and ceremonies. To understand our relationship in ceremonies, because that's where we understand prayer. Understand our relationship to the Creator, to our Unchimaka, to the spirits, the Holy Spirits. Because there's a lot of darkness in the world. We know that. I think the people here know that. We're confronted with it. People are depressed. People are suicidal. A lot of darkness. So part of it is taking action on creating light of the holy being, the great spirit, Iyonyampa, the light of the great spirit. So when we put up the tree of life in our Sundance, it's the festival of light, bringing in the light of the great spirit to confront the darkness. Very critical, very important. My friend of mine that practices his culture from the Amazon of Brazil, Chief Ninawa. Mona knows Ninawa. And he always talks, when he went to the UN meeting, he says, they don't pray. They don't pray. These government, they don't pray. They're not talking about the spirituality of prayer, spirituality of addressing the crisis of climate change. There's no prayer. The other thing I want to talk about real quick, we have an economic system that is not sustainable. We have an economic system that doesn't understand the sacredness of Mother Earth and the relationship to the air and the sky and the universe. So how do we create and make a transition away from an extractive economy? The United States has an economy based on an extractive reality. And how do we shift from that into a living economy, not a death economy, a regenerative economy? Very important. And that does address a challenge, whether we have population that live in the city or in the country. How do we address capitalism? Capitalism. We have to confront that. Someone mentioned addiction. We are an addictive society as Americans. I'm sorry to tell you that. But we have to confront that. We think it's a right when we turn on the switch and get electricity. How much wattage, how much electricity are we using in the cities so that the skyscrapers are lit up all night, 24/7. All that energy, where we're going to get the energy to fire up. If we're going to go renewable energy, imagine the thousands of solar panels, wind turbines to keep up to the addiction needs of America. So these are things I think about, making it a just transition. What is that? What is a just transition? We have redefined that, and on our webpage we have indigenous principles of just transition, so that we can start building building sustainable community. That's what we are taking action on. People say, we know what you guys are against. Mr. Fletcher mentioned a lot of those things that we are against. But what are we for? We're for creating healthy, sustainable communities that understand their relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth. They know who they are, their identity, that they confronted the symptoms of colonization and they've gone through a decolonization process. So kids are running and love Mother Earth. They're not treating her as if she's in economic liquidation. They give prayer and offerings. So that's what change needs to happen to everyone. It's not just an American Indian thing. All of us need to reevaluate our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your wonderful messages. And, what I think about is I have to reflect on those things that you all said. And how I reflect on them is, what did I hear? What did I see? What do I think? How do I feel? And I'd like to, invite you all to do that for the time that you've spent here this evening and hearing the messages that have been shared with you tonight by these wonderful panelists here, people who are out there doing the work and being voices for the voiceless. And so one of the things I thought about was, for you to all maybe share with us a phrase, a word that you would like to leave with us as we conclude our evening here. My phrase that I thought of is that of my mother. She said, "Do it while you can and while it's still here."
Defiant hope.
Dainu, we've had enough, and we have enough.
Justice, justice we must pursue.
Wichoni, life.
Faith moves mountains.
Take care of that which has true value. And so we are drawing to a close, and I want to say how moved I am by everything that's been shared, and I'm resisting the temptation to comment on it and to take the lead from Mona Palaka, who is so wise in inviting us all to reflect as time unfolds. And I would like to invite us all to also interact, meet, greet, have something to eat and to drink, and enjoy the beautiful music. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.